On the evening of September 14, 2019, emergency dispatchers in Tulsa, Oklahoma, received a frantic 911 call from 31-year-old Bridget Sullivan. She reported that her husband, 33-year-old Ryan Sullivan, had been shot during what she described as a home invasion at their residence on East 71st Street. Bridget told the dispatcher that she had been in the upstairs bedroom when she heard breaking glass, followed by shouting and then a single gunshot. By the time she came downstairs, she claimed, the intruder had fled through the back door, leaving Ryan bleeding on the kitchen floor. Patrol officers from the Tulsa Police Department arrived at the scene within 7 minutes of the call. They found Ryan Sullivan lying face up near the kitchen island, a single gunshot wound to his chest. Paramedics worked to stabilize him, but the injury had severed a major artery. Ryan was pronounced dead at St. Francis Hospital approximately 40 minutes after the shooting. Bridget appeared distraught, sitting on the front porch with a blanket around her shoulders, answering officers' preliminary questions between sobs. She repeated her account of hearing glass break, then hearing Ryan confront someone, followed by the gunshot. She said she had been too frightened to come downstairs immediately and had called 911 from the upstairs bedroom. Officers noted that Bridget had no visible injuries and that her clothing showed no signs of blood spatter, despite the significant blood loss at the scene. What investigators would discover over the following weeks was that there had been no home invasion. The broken glass had been staged, and Bridget Sullivan had not been upstairs when her husband was shot. She had been standing less than 6 feet away, holding the gun that killed him. Her motive was as old as crime itself. She had fallen in love with someone else and saw murder as the simplest solution to an inconvenient marriage. That someone else was Ryan's younger brother, 28-year-old Colin Sullivan. Ryan and Bridget Sullivan had been married for 6 years at the time of Ryan's death. The couple met in 2012 while both were attending the University of Oklahoma, where Ryan studied mechanical engineering and Bridget pursued a degree in communications. They married in the summer of 2013 in a small ceremony attended by close family and friends. By all external appearances, their marriage was stable. Ryan worked as a project engineer for an energy company with offices in downtown Tulsa, earning a solid middle-class income. Bridget worked part-time as a social media coordinator for a local marketing agency, a position that allowed her flexibility to work from home several days per week. The couple had purchased their 3-bedroom ranch-style house in 2016 and had spent considerable time renovating it. Neighbors described them as friendly and private, the kind of couple who waved hello but rarely socialized beyond occasional backyard barbecues. They had no children, though. Friends later told investigators that Ryan had expressed interest in starting a family, while Bridget seemed more hesitant about the timing. Ryan's younger brother, Colin Sullivan, had always been part of their lives, though his presence became more prominent beginning in early 2018. Colin had struggled to establish stability after dropping out of college in his early 20s. He worked a series of temporary jobs in construction, retail, and food service, never staying in one position for more than a few months. He had accumulated debt, been evicted from 2 apartments, and had a history of borrowing money from family members that he rarely repaid. In February 2018, after being evicted from his most recent apartment in Oklahoma City, Colin asked Ryan if he could stay with him and Bridget temporarily while he got back on his feet. Ryan, who had always felt protective of his younger brother despite their differences, agreed without hesitation. Bridget was less enthusiastic, but did not object. Colin moved into the guest bedroom with the understanding that the arrangement would last no more than 3 months. 3 months became 6, then 9, then a year. Colin found work at a warehouse distribution center, but his income was inconsistent, and he made little effort to save money for a security deposit on a new place. Ryan grew frustrated but avoided direct confrontation, instead gently suggesting that Colin start looking for apartments. Bridget's attitude toward Colin, however, began to shift in a way that no one in the family anticipated. According to digital evidence later recovered by investigators, the relationship between Bridget Sullivan and Colin Sullivan evolved from casual household interaction to emotional intimacy sometime around October 2018. Text messages extracted from both of their phones showed that the two began communicating privately while Ryan was at work, initially discussing mundane topics like groceries and household chores, but gradually shifting to more personal subjects. By December 2018, the tone of the messages had become unmistakably romantic. Colin wrote to Bridget, "I think about you all the time. I know this is wrong, but I can't help it. Bridget responded, I feel the same way. I don't know what to do. This is so complicated. The messages escalated quickly from there, with both parties expressing feelings of attraction and frustration about the situation. In one exchange, Colin wrote, if things were different, if you weren't with Ryan, I would want to be with you. Bridget replied, maybe things can be different. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The affair became physical in January 2019. According to their own later statements and evidence gathered from the investigation, Bridget and Colin began meeting secretly during the day, while Ryan was at work. On multiple occasions, they had sexual encounters in the home that Ryan owned and where Colin was living as a guest. Security camera footage from a neighbor's property showed Colin's vehicle remaining parked in the driveway during hours when he should have been at work, and Bridget's car never leaving the property. The relationship continued for months, with both Bridget and Colin becoming increasingly careless about concealing their involvement. Friends of Bridget later reported noticing changes in her behavior during this period. She became more distant from Ryan, less engaged in their marriage, and increasingly secretive about her schedule. One friend recalled asking Bridget if everything was okay in her marriage, and Bridget responding vaguely that she felt stuck and didn't know how to move forward. Ryan, for his part, seemed oblivious to what was happening under his own roof. Co-workers later told investigators that Ryan had mentioned no marital problems and had spoken positively about Bridget in the weeks leading up to his death. He did, however, express growing frustration with Colin's extended stay and had told one colleague that he planned to have a serious conversation with his brother about moving out by the end of the summer. By August 2019, Bridget and Colin were discussing their future together, openly in their private communications. Text messages showed that they had talked about what life would be like if they could be together without hiding. Colin wrote, I wish we could just start over somewhere, just you and me. Bridget responded, that sounds perfect, but you know it's not that simple. When Colin asked what she meant, Bridget wrote, Ryan would never just let me go. A divorce would take forever and cost everything. There has to be another way. This exchange, recovered by digital forensics investigators, would become a critical piece of evidence in establishing premeditation. In the weeks following that conversation, Bridget and Colin's text messages took on a darker tone. While they never explicitly wrote the words kill Ryan or murder, their communications revealed a clear discussion of how to remove Ryan from their lives permanently. On August 20th, 2019, Colin sent Bridget a message asking, what if something happened to him, like an accident? Bridget replied, accidents happen all the time. People die unexpectedly. Over the next 3 weeks, the two exchanged dozens of messages exploring various scenarios. They discussed making Ryan's death look like a car accident, a fall down the stairs, or a random act of violence. Each idea was eventually rejected as too risky or too difficult to execute convincingly. It was Colin who first suggested staging a home invasion. He wrote, what if someone broke in while you were home, and Ryan was just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Bridget responded enthusiastically, that could work. Break-ins happen in this neighborhood. The plan began to take shape in early September 2019. Bridget and Colin agreed that they would stage a robbery gone wrong. Colin would leave for work as usual on a predetermined day, establishing an alibi, while Bridget would remain at home with Ryan. At a specific time, Bridget would shoot Ryan with a handgun that Colin would provide, then break a window to simulate forced entry and call 911, claiming an intruder had killed her husband. The weapon was acquired on September 7, 2019. Colin purchased a 9mm handgun from a private seller he found through an online classifieds website. The transaction, which took place in a grocery store parking lot, was legal under Oklahoma law, which does not require background checks for private sales. Colin paid $350 in cash and provided no identification. He brought the gun home and hid it in his bedroom closet, wrapped in a towel inside a duffel bag. On September 13, 2019, the night before the murder, Bridget and Colin finalized the details. Text messages showed that they agreed Colin would leave for work at his usual time of 7:30 a.m. and would make sure to clock in and be visible to coworkers throughout the day. Bridget would wait until early evening, when Ryan typically arrived home from work and was relaxed, before carrying out the shooting. She would then break the kitchen window from the inside, hide the gun, and call 911. Colin would remain at work until he received word about Ryan's death, at which point he would rush home to comfort Bridget and maintain the appearance of a grieving brother. The final message Colin sent to Bridget that night read, "Are you sure you can do this?" Bridget replied, "I have to. It's the only way we can be together." Colin wrote back, "I love you. This will all be over soon." Bridget responded, "I love you too. Tomorrow our lives start over." On the morning of September 14th, 2019, Colin Sullivan left for work at his usual time. Surveillance footage from a gas station near the warehouse where he worked showed him purchasing coffee at 7:52 a.m. He clocked in at 8:03 a.m. and remained at the warehouse for the duration of his shift, a fact later confirmed by his supervisor and multiple co-workers who interacted with him throughout the day. Ryan Sullivan left for his office in downtown Tulsa at approximately 8:15 a.m. Co-workers reported that Ryan seemed in good spirits, discussing plans for an upcoming project and mentioning that he was looking forward to the weekend. He left work at 5:30 p.m., his typical departure time, and stopped at a grocery store on his way home to pick up items for dinner. Security footage from the store showed Ryan at the checkout counter at 6:02 p.m. Ryan arrived home at approximately 6:20 p.m. Neighbors reported seeing his truck pull into the driveway. Bridget was already inside, having worked from home that day. What happened over the next 20 minutes would be reconstructed through forensic evidence, Bridget's own statements, and the physical layout of the crime scene. According to the timeline established by investigators, Ryan entered through the front door and placed the grocery bags on the kitchen counter. He and Bridget exchanged brief conversation about their respective days. At some point during this interaction, Bridget retrieved the 9mm handgun that Colin had hidden in the guest bedroom. She returned to the kitchen where Ryan was unpacking groceries and without warning fired a single shot at close range into his chest. The bullet entered Ryan's body just below the sternum, traveled upward, and severed the descending aorta. Ryan collapsed immediately, falling backward onto the tile floor. Blood spread rapidly across the kitchen. Bridget stood over him, watching as he struggled to breathe. Ryan was conscious for several seconds, long enough to see his wife holding the gun, though he was unable to speak. He died within 2 to 3 minutes, according to the medical examiner's later analysis. Bridget then moved quickly to stage the scene. She used a hammer to break the glass pane of the back door from the inside, scattering shards across the threshold to simulate forced entry. She wiped down the gun and hid it in the garage, wrapped in a plastic bag inside a storage bin filled with holiday decorations. She then went upstairs, changed into different clothing, and called 911 at 6:43 p.m., approximately 20 minutes after shooting Ryan. During the 911 call, Bridget's voice was frantic and high-pitched. She told the dispatcher, "Someone broke into my house. They shot my husband. I think he's dead. Oh my God, there's so much blood." When the dispatcher asked where the intruder was, Bridget said, "He ran out the back door. I was upstairs. I heard breaking glass and then a gunshot. Please send help." Officers arrived to find the scene exactly as Bridget had arranged it. Broken glass at the back door, Ryan dead in the kitchen, and Bridget sitting on the front porch appearing traumatized and disoriented. Detectives from the Tulsa Police Department's homicide unit were assigned to the case within hours of the shooting. The initial investigation focused on Bridget's account of a home invasion. However, inconsistencies began to emerge almost immediately. Crime scene investigators noted that the broken glass at the back door had fallen inward, consistent with the glass being broken from inside the house rather than outside. Additionally, there were no footprints or signs of disturbance in the backyard, despite recent rain that had left the ground muddy. The back gate, which Bridget claimed the intruder must have used to escape, was still latched from the inside. Inside the house, investigators found no evidence of ransacking or theft. Ryan's wallet, containing cash and credit cards, was sitting on the kitchen counter. Bridget's purse, laptop, and jewelry were all undisturbed. A flat-screen television and other valuable electronics remained in place. If the motive for the break-in had been robbery, nothing had been taken. The medical examiner's preliminary analysis also raised questions. The gunshot wound showed stippling and powder burns, indicating that the weapon had been fired from very close range, likely within 3 to 5 feet. This contradicted Bridget's statement that she had been upstairs during the shooting. If an intruder had shot Ryan during a confrontation, the distance between them would likely have been greater. Detectives conducted an initial interview with Bridget at the police station later that evening. She repeated her account of being upstairs when she heard glass breaking and a gunshot. When asked why she had not immediately come downstairs to check on Ryan, Bridget said she had been frozen with fear and had hidden in the bedroom closet before calling 911. Detectives noted that her clothing showed no signs of blood, despite the significant blood loss at the scene. Bridget explained that she had not approached Ryan's body because she could tell he was dead and did not want to disturb the scene. When detectives asked about Ryan's relationships and whether anyone might have wanted to harm him, Bridget mentioned no conflicts or enemies. She described Ryan as well-liked and easygoing. However, when asked about the state of their marriage, Bridget hesitated before saying that everything had been fine. Detectives noted the pause and the lack of specificity in her response. Colin Sullivan arrived at the police station around 10:30 p.m. after being notified of his brother's death by detectives who had contacted him at work. Colin appeared visibly upset, crying and asking repeatedly what had happened. He told investigators that Ryan had been his best friend and that he couldn't believe someone would hurt him. When asked about his whereabouts that day, Colin provided a detailed account of his work schedule, which detectives later confirmed with his employer. At this early stage of the investigation, Colin was not considered a suspect. He had an airtight alibi, and there was no apparent motive for him to be involved in his brother's death. Bridget, while behaving strangely in some respects, had also called 911 and cooperated with investigators. However, detectives were not convinced by the home invasion narrative, and they began looking more closely at Bridget's background and recent activities. The breakthrough in the investigation came on September 18, 2019, 4 days after the murder, when detectives obtained a warrant to search the Sullivan residence. During the search, investigators located the 9mm handgun hidden in the garage. Ballistics testing confirmed that it was the weapon used to kill Ryan Sullivan. The gun had been wiped clean, but forensic analysts found a partial fingerprint on the magazine that matched Bridget Sullivan. When confronted with this evidence, Bridget initially claimed she had no knowledge of the gun's presence in her home. She suggested that the intruder must have left it behind. Detectives pointed out that this made no sense, as criminals do not typically hide their weapons at crime scenes. Bridget then changed her story, saying that Ryan must have purchased the gun without telling her. However, records showed that Ryan had never applied for a firearms license or purchased a weapon through legal channels. Detectives next obtained warrants for Bridget and Colin's cell phones and digital communications. Forensic analysts extracted thousands of text messages, photos, and call logs. What they found was the complete record of Bridget and Colin's affair, including the explicit discussions about removing Ryan from their lives and the detailed planning of the staged home invasion. On September 23, 2019, detectives brought Colin Sullivan in for a second interview. Confronted with the text messages, Colin initially denied that the conversations were about murder, claiming they were just venting frustrations. However, when presented with the specific messages discussing the timeline, the gun, and the plan to stage a break-in, Colin broke down. He admitted that he and Bridget had been having an affair and that they had discussed killing Ryan, but he claimed that he had never believed Bridget would actually go through with it. He insisted that he had not provided her with the gun and had not known she was going to shoot Ryan that day. This statement was immediately contradicted by the evidence. Records showed that Colin had purchased the gun on September 7th, and text messages confirmed that he had brought it to the house and hidden it for Bridget to use. Detectives arrested Colin and charged him with conspiracy to commit murder and accessory to murder. If you've been following along, hit the like button and let me know in the comments what you think happened here. Bridget Sullivan was arrested the same day and charged with first-degree murder. During her booking, she remained largely silent, speaking only to request an attorney. Both Bridget and Colin were held without bond pending trial. The trial of Bridget Sullivan and Colin Sullivan began in June 2020 at the Tulsa County Courthouse. Due to the interconnected nature of their alleged crimes, the prosecution requested that they be tried together, and the judge granted the motion. Both defendants entered pleas of not guilty. The prosecution's case was built on the digital evidence recovered from the defendants' phones, the forensic evidence from the crime scene, and expert testimony regarding the implausibility of Bridget's home invasion story. During opening statements, the lead prosecutor described the case as a calculated murder motivated by lust and selfishness, arguing that Bridget and Colin had conspired to kill Ryan so they could be together without the complications of divorce. Prosecutors presented the text messages in chronological order, showing the jury how the relationship progressed from an affair to discussions of murder to detailed planning. They emphasized specific messages in which Bridget and Colin explicitly discussed the logistics of the killing and the need to establish an alibi for Colin. The prosecutors stated, "These are not the words of people caught up in passion. These are the words of cold, calculated killers." The forensic evidence was equally damaging. The medical examiner testified that the close-range nature of the gunshot wound was inconsistent with a confrontation between Ryan and an unknown intruder. Crime scene investigators explained why the broken glass pattern indicated that the door had been broken from inside the house. Ballistics experts confirmed that the gun found in the garage was the murder weapon and that Bridget's fingerprint was on it. Bridget's defense attorney attempted to argue that, while Bridget had been having an affair with Colin, she had not intended to kill Ryan. The attorney suggested that the shooting might have occurred during an argument that escalated unexpectedly, and that Bridget had panicked and staged the scene to avoid responsibility. However, this theory was undermined by the text messages showing premeditation, and by the fact that Ryan had no defensive wounds or signs of a struggle. Colin's defense took a different approach. His attorney argued that Colin had been manipulated by Bridget, that he had genuinely believed their discussions about killing Ryan were fantasy rather than serious planning, and that he had been horrified when he learned that Bridget had actually shot Ryan. The attorney portrayed Colin as a weak-willed younger brother who had fallen under the influence of a manipulative woman. The jury was unconvinced by either defense. Deliberations lasted 2 days before they returned. Guilty verdicts for both defendants. Bridget Sullivan was convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Colin Sullivan was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and accessory to murder. Bridget Sullivan was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the first-degree murder conviction. The conspiracy charge carried an additional 25-year sentence to be served concurrently. During the sentencing hearing, Ryan's parents delivered emotional victim impact statements. His mother described Ryan as a kind and generous person who had loved his brother and trusted his wife, and who had been betrayed by the two people closest to him. She stated, "Bridget didn't just take my son's life, she destroyed our entire family." Colin Sullivan was sentenced to 35 years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder and accessory to murder, with the possibility of parole after serving 85% of his sentence. His attorney had requested leniency based on Colin's lesser role in the actual killing, but the judge emphasized that Colin had provided the weapon and had actively participated in planning the murder. The judge stated, "You may not have pulled the trigger, but you armed the killer and helped plan your own brother's death. That deserves severe punishment." Both Bridget and Colin are currently serving their sentences in Oklahoma State prisons. Bridget is incarcerated at Mabel Bassett Correctional Center in McLeod, Oklahoma. Colin is at James Crabtree Correctional Center in Helena, Oklahoma. Neither has filed an appeal. Ryan Sullivan's parents have established a scholarship in his name at the University of Oklahoma's engineering program, awarding funds annually to students demonstrating both academic excellence and strong character. The house where Ryan was killed was sold by his estate in 2021, and the proceeds were distributed according to his will, which left everything to his parents, as he and Bridget had no children, and his marriage to her was dissolved posthumously by the court. The murder of Ryan Sullivan stands as a tragic example of betrayal at its most fundamental level. Ryan was killed not by a stranger or an enemy, but by his wife and his brother, two people he had loved and trusted completely. The case illustrates how infidelity, when combined with selfishness and a willingness to prioritize personal desires over human life, can lead to devastating consequences. Legal analysts who reviewed the case noted that the digital evidence was crucial to securing convictions. Without the text messages documenting the affair and the planning, prosecutors would have faced a much more difficult task, proving premeditation. The case has been used in law enforcement training seminars as an example of the importance of obtaining and analyzing digital communications in modern homicide investigations. For Ryan's family, the pain of his loss has been compounded by the knowledge that it was entirely preventable. If Bridget had simply filed for divorce, or if Colin had refused to participate in the scheme, Ryan would still be alive. Instead, two people chose murder as a solution to an inconvenient marriage, and in doing so, destroyed not only Ryan's life, but their own as well. The question that haunts this case is whether Bridget and Colin truly believed they would get away with it, or whether their judgment had been so clouded by their relationship that they convinced themselves the plan was foolproof. Either way, the result was the same. One man dead, two people spending decades in prison, and a family forever shattered. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please like and subscribe for more cases like this. Let us know in the comments what you think about this case and where you're watching from today.